Hello, everybody. We're on air. We're live. We're live. This is the Auburn School Department Subcommittee and Building Committee meeting tonight for the new Edward Little High School. Who's leading off?
We are.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. So welcome to November. This is in some ways our last charge of the building subcommittees to really kind of wrap up what we've been working on since we approved the referendum. And tonight's really the summary of recommendations from those subcommittees to this building committee. And so all the subcommittees are meeting just prior to this to kind of walk through those lists and come forward with some recommendations. And so that's the big part of tonight's presentation, but then we'll also provide some updates on all the programming that's happened since last time we met, as well as progress to date on some plan modifications that have continued to be developed. So just a reminder, the subcommittees are athletics and site, performing arts, sustainability and building systems, community use and partnership, fundraising, and communications. And the first three, athletics, site, performing arts, and sustainability and building systems, kind of had their charge during this time to explore different subjects. And so we took a pass at sort of summarizing what those items were leading into tonight's subcommittee meetings. But I'm sure, as it does every time we all meet, we come up with so many other things to discuss. So I'd like to hear from the chair or co-chair, Scott, if possible, on an update as to what the recommendations are from your subcommittee to the building committee for moving forward with site and athletics.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot. There was good discussion. There was discussion out of the gate, really talking about the distance from when we're looking at the stadium, the distance from the bleachers, where fans would sit. What would that look like in terms of going across an 8-lane track to being, how the viewability, I just made up a word, the viewability of being able to watch that. And so we got into some discussions of some different venues, what's that look like at Lewiston, some of their experiences of how close and how far, and just how much space are we really talking about, because it varies from sport to sport. If you are in the home stands, how far away from you the stands were from the players on the field. We talked a bit about some of the storage options, and there's still some ability to do some tweaking and adjusting in terms of where their location is. And we're not talking drastic movement, but just subtle movements. And some of that will be dictated on the topography of the site. Same thing with the outside concessions. We had a discussion in terms of, and that's where I'm glad Peter's here, because Todd's got his charge. My charge is to the bond question. It would really violate what the bond was passed at. So I'll explore that further.
Morning sounds fine, Scott.
Morning sounds fine.
Morning's fine.
So I'll explore that further with you, just so we can feel confident about how we're moving forward. As a group, I still think that we're in consensus where up to, if the funding is available to do the multipurpose as turf, but at this point in time, why not just ask that question so we can be as confident as we can be and as diligent as we can be for the community and the programming that is asked there. The rest was just more of reviewing everything that you had up there. And then we wrapped up with some conversation about the interior concessions, and we have some ideas in mind on how to shape that in terms of, the window spacings and having it accessible to the hallway and the gym at the same time. And I think Mr. Gordon has some models that he's going to share with Melissa, and I think it's not the end-all be-all, but it really shows their investment in it, and I appreciate his efforts in doing that. And it's not about wall space, it's about counter space and having viewable access to the gym and also access out to the hallway. So there wasn't a whole lot that is different than what you had up there.
So in general, is that a good summary for the recommendations to the?
Yep, the only piece, and I don't see how we would really be able to move it, but again, I would say we want to be confident and as diligent as possible when talking about, it wouldn't change any of that because that multi-purpose field is still, if funds are available through grants and things like that, but that's where I would really want to sit with Peter and really kind of vet that through with how the question was worded. And Todd still needs to explore whether there would be a Title IX violation, and straight face, I think it would be, but I'm not the attorney.
So is that, just for clarification, that's moving it on the same, on the school site, though?
Yeah, everything would stay on site, so that instead of turfing the multi-purpose, that it would move to a different venue on site.
So where would it go to, Scott?
The conversation was to the baseball field.
To the baseball field instead of the multi-purpose field?
And
And that's
Todd was able to weigh in that this, what we have in the model right now supports the programming that we're looking to do.
For the Title IX and all? Okay. I have another question. On the extra storage building was added. So was it added, is there a cost to add it? That was, I'm trying to keep the cost in check. Was that a cost that,
I would have to ask Frank and Melissa where that where that landed, the storage. We weren't going grand, we were going meaningful.
Okay.
To support all of the needs in that area. It wasn't, it was definitely needed because there was some exploration of putting storage underneath the bleachers, and that was very cost prohibitive.
okay. I just wanted to be sure that we weren't adding things.
No,
cost
many of
factors
our
to that.
conversations around storage have been twofold. One for equipment, meaning site equipment, and other for sports-specific equipment. And definitely looking, as we've had these conversations over the last few months, where is suitable space for that? Like, you may find suitable space, but is it housed in a meaningful place?
So we have tiny houses. Can a tiny house be used as a storage facility?
Or a tiny storage?
For tiny storage, right, right.
Well, but students could build it
They
as part
could,
of the
correct.
CTE program.
I guess I would go back to Scott Brown, like, what are they supporting?
Okay.
And so that's always been kind of some of the mindset, what they support, and they would, from our previous workings with them, they support what our needs are.
Okay, good.
With that, we will move on to performing arts.
All right, I'm going to ask Bill to kind of walk us through some of our discussion here.
So we looked at the design as projected. Are you presenting?
We can, yeah,
do
we
you
can
wanna-
kind of get a little further along here.
I think the last time we met, we were considering different options as far as a deep auditorium or a balcony, different size stage.
We have it.
Here we go. And looking at trying to maximize the space, both for storage, audience, and stage performance space, we did decide the best route would be to go with the balcony option. With, I think it's a really well-designed, laid-out, flexible space where you've got about 400 seats on the floor, as you see in the picture on the left to the bottom side. The second half, the back, there'll be like a dividing walkway in the middle. So if you had a smaller show, you could just kind of close off that back half. And then the back half has about 350, again, for a medium-sized show. And some of your larger events are all city concerts, our district festivals, any state festivals that would come in. We could use the balcony and full school assemblies. There's about 370-ish seats on the balcony. And they've got a design on the balcony that has aisles on the side, which is a much safer approach, rather than having aisles down the center or off kind of into the seats a little ways. And so it allows your audience to feel more secure in that space as well as just being safer to use. They've designed a nice rounded, if you look at the design of it, it's with the balcony, I'm not sure you'll see it from these pictures, but it's got a nice flow to it. So as you look at it, it really brings your eye to the center of the stage, while also allowing for some nice features as far as light placement. We can place some lights and projectors along the front of the balcony, as well as the side parts as well.
I'm showing.
Okay.
There we go.
I think it's really nice with all the different seating areas. You know, looking at it as far as what we're going to do with our audience when they come, it's really got great access from multiple. Looking at just the floor level, you've got 4 or 5 different entry points, so it flows really well from an audience perspective. We've also got sound locks and light locks on each of the entryways. What that means is you don't enter directly from the hallway into the auditorium, but there's like a little vestibule in between, so you can enter. There's another set of doors inside that, so that things can be going on, whether it's in the gym or in the hallway or during the school day, and it won't interfere with what's happening in the auditorium, which is nice. We did have some discussions about the access to the stage, and looking at some of the stage storage there for piano, choral shells, and things like that, trying to work out some of the details. We still have to discuss that a little bit with theater projects, as how that's going to lay out. But it's got a lot more details than we had last time. Those are kind of the highlights.
So you guys also did some tours too?
We did, yes. Last week, John, Darren Avery, and myself went with the architects and the people from Theater Designs. We toured Westbrook Middle School, which was very informational, found what worked, what didn't work. Some things we learned from that was the ticket. We talked a lot about the ticket concessions window, and theirs is very small. In fact, they don't use it at all because it's so small, and it's awkwardly laid out. So ours is much bigger than theirs. Where it's positioned right in the corner, we've been talking about how maybe instead of having the window on one side, either having it on both sides or kind of at an angle. So it gives you maximum access to the audience. We also talked about the bathrooms. I know we had that discussion last time. And in Westbrook, they had to actually have paper signs up directing how to get to the bathrooms. And if I have to go hunting for the bathroom during intermission, that's not a good design. So in our plan now, I think they probably doubled or more the size of the women's and men's rooms. And they're looking at doing some single-user restrooms, which would be nice for families or in case we need to have a single user. They've also positioned some bathrooms. I know we talked on the tour about restroom access for particularly the band and choir rooms in the back side of the building, because we don't want our students to have to go halfway across the building to use the bathroom. So they've placed some bathrooms back there that could also be used for dressing rooms. We also had the opportunity to tour Merrill Auditorium down in Portland, which was great. And I was surprised to know how limited their backstage was. So I think in some ways we'll have greater flexibility backstage than even Merrill Auditorium does. Some of the things we learned also at Westbrook is regards to some of our fly system. We're right now talking about if we want a mechanical fly system or an electronic hydraulic lift type of system or a computerized lift, just the pros and cons with that, and then the expenses that will come with that. So some good takeaways from that. Anything else you want to add?
And I think the big thing that we're going to kind of keep working on is, do we do like some of the side support spaces? Right now we've got them just kind of labeled as tool storage. Do we really need that? And then some of those kind of things do, the teachers back there, the staff, looking at where exactly do we put the band practice rooms and the openings and some of those nitty-gritty details that'll get kind of workshopped out with the staff that works there. But that's literally just kind of where do we want to put the doors and those kind of things, and moving walls a little bit one way or another.
Just kind of help you understand the layout you're looking at here on the right side with the white picture. It shows you in the middle is where the middle aisle would be, so where you would enter the auditorium. And then the front of the house, as we call it, is to the right, which rakes downwards to the front of the stage. And then to the left of that area is the back of the house, where the picture of the gentleman standing is where the control room area would be. There'll also be a sound control area in the middle of the house where you see, I think it's a wheelchair, right about that space. There are wheelchair access points scattered throughout the auditorium, both at the balcony level, I believe. Yes, at the balcony, at all 3 tier levels, there'll be wheelchair access available, as well as on the side. As you enter, there's a platform that, or a walkway that goes from that side door all the way to the stage at level. So you could fit probably 20 or so wheelchairs right on those levels, pretty close to the stage, without any difficulty. There's one catwalk, as you see, suspended in the middle of the ceiling there. And they're looking at the possibility of mounting some of our follow spots, which traditionally is mounted towards the back of the auditorium, but putting them there on the catwalk, which would be more secure for that instrument there, as well as a great access, obviously, to the stage. But having the catwalk go across the length, the width of the stage, would be a great opportunity to place the lights with good access to the stage. So.
I think from a design standpoint, one important thing I'll kind of mention, just so everyone can kind of think about it, that we have like a center cross aisle. That is at the same level as the corridor out in the hallway, the main entrance, the first floor. That's all level. The stage itself is going to be at the same level as the hallways. So everything's at that same level to kind of give you, and then the front of the house is down 3 feet 6 inches, and then the back of the house is up 5 feet. So it'll, 8.5 feet from the back all the way to the front. But the center is kind of even with the corridor and all that. So to kind of give you guys a thought. So, yeah.
All right.
Questions?
Nice job.
Yeah.
Thank you for including the handicapped, the wheelchairs. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Thank you.
With that, we will hear from the Sustainability and Building Systems Subcommittee.
We talked a lot about porta potties.
We did.
We talked about commissioning and toilets and the building envelope. We talked about everything that you said there on it, that you say. Jeff led us right down the track on it. Let's see. We talked about the building as a teaching tool. Mr. Kendall always felt that we should know, that students should know what was happening inside the building on it for the mechanical parts of it. So we talked about the building as a teaching tool. We talked about talked about solar graphics because we're going down that road a little bit. So the city is, the school department is. So we talked about that. We talked about having a space before and after what the building looked like. So it's kind of a cutaway of the old EL so that you could see the half-inch brick and the plywood or whatever's out there, plasterboard, whatever there, as it is now. We talked about having the real cutaway that it is now, either a picture or a presentation. We talked about that. We talked about toilets and plumbing fixtures to be sure that everything was new, but could be readily if it broke, we could readily get what we needed again on it. So we weren't going too far afloat with that. Wanted to be sure that replacement parts were readily available. We talked about exposed ducts in the gym. The ducts would be exposed in the gym. This is interesting. The students said no lockers. They did not want lockers at the school. They're going to have some small multifunctional bag rooms that they can put their athletic equipment in nearby, and maybe here and there a few lockers that are different sizes that you can put your instrument in it, or you can put your pocketbook in it, or whatever in it, and you put your own lock on it. We talked a lot about commissioning and the scope of work. That's the first thing that I believe we're going to go out for an RFP on, is the commissioning. We need to be sure that we have somebody that can deal with our electrical, our mechanical, all our features that are inside of the building on it. So we talked about that. Let's see. We talked about, while we're commissioning, we talked about commissioning, be sure we're commissioning the lockdown system so that it works on it. We talked about positioning of the fire poles, where they should go, and what the fire department is suggesting.
You're saying no polls.
That's generally what the conversation was, yeah.
On it. So we talked about we talked about the interior material that we would choose to do it. we were pretty busy in what we said. Anybody else have anything? Nope.
I have a couple slides just to show the exterior materials we talked about, which was what we explored before at our last meeting, but kind of what we summarized. And so it's the tactile brick and trespa, and tactile is a cementitious panel system. Brick, I think most folks are familiar with, will be locally sourced here. And then trespa is a phenolic or resin panel, and then glazing windows, and just images of what those materials look like. So a simple palette, but again, really trying to create that warm and welcoming feel. And then we summarized sort of the strategy to creating the quality of place that we've heard through the entire design. And we, after reviewing all the teacher surveys, all the information we had, kind of came up with this list of 5. So the sense of belonging, the sense of welcoming, innovative, collaborative, bright, modern, and current. And then just different design strategies that are in the design, and how we will start to apply a simple palette of materials to these different design strategies. So whether it's through wayfinding, and it's, or brand function clusters, which is the idea of coming up with a palette of materials to really start to identify the different areas within the building. And we group those functions into student commons, town square, classroom communities, CTE programs, art corridor, and athletics. So again, really trying to create an identity with those different uses. Transparency or celebrating learning, so having that transparency with the glass in the school, and then connection to the outdoors, and then how do we implement that with materials? So again, a very simple palette, but using natural materials like wood to have that sense of warmth, but making sure all the materials are very durable and easy to maintain. So wood, tile on some of the walls, and rubber tiles on the floor, and then a neutral color palette throughout the school, and then the use of accents in different areas, glazing, graphics, and signage to kind of execute that. So that was a summary of what we had presented the last time. So, anything else on building
No, I
systems?
think we're done
All right.
with the,
So with that, fundraising.
Yeah, so thank you to communications community. Anyone who isn't attached to the other 3 subcommittees have joined the fundraising. So we are working on the naming rights type of document, and we've been exploring Sanford's, Mount Ararat, also looking at what else is out there around that naming. So we put together a draft, and I just noted some other things that you just said, adding the town square to this, the art corridor, student commons, classroom communities, so there are other opportunities. So this is all in draft and open for feedback. What we noticed from Mount Ararat is that they do a 15-year kind of, I guess you call sunset, I called it a sunset, that the name will be there for 15 years. So we looked at possibly 25 years, if we looked at the building being 75 years, starting there. And we picked, because we needed 6 levels at this point, visionary level being the $1 million level for the Performing Arts Center complex. And then we wrote a little bit about that and whether we would write a little bit about each of these items we would have to discuss. Then a $500,000 level for the athletic stadium, $250,000 level for the competition gym, $100,000 for auxiliary gym health center, $50,000, and you can read those for the public. I guess we were talking about the cafeteria commons area. You're calling the student commons area, I believe, so changing the wording. Wording the presentation area, the Agora presentation area, the restaurant, media center, stadium concession stand, baseball field, softball field, multipurpose field, athletic stadium, scoreboard, should have been 1S. And then at the 25,000 would be bronze level, which would be the other athletic scoreboards, the CTE learning labs. And then I just saw some other things that could be added, which is town square or art corridor, student commons, community, well, we have that, classroom communities. And then at the bottom, putting, $250 for the performing arts seat, but $500 for the first and second row seats each. And then $1,000 for traditional classroom, about $2,500 for office and conference room, and $10,000 for dedicated spaces, larger rooms. So we would have to discuss what those were defined as. And I think we reached, if all of this was answered, about $3 million or so. So this was kind of a beginning, so any type of feedback. We did talk a lot about an individual's contribution as opposed to a business sponsorship. So an individual who's giving up, $500,000 of inheritance or something they're contributing, what does that mean to a family rather than a business, a bank that might have $1 billion in asset and they can do $250 a year, or $100,000 a year, or $10,000. Is that different? So we kind of said, would there be a sponsorship paper as well, where if you're going to sponsor, this is what it would mean. If you're giving it from your family or as an individual, what that means. So we kind of tried to talk about that a little bit. And so this was kind of our first pass, wanting to get, come back to you maybe at our next meeting, giving kind of a clearance to bring it to school committee, that these would be the levels, these would be the items, anything else we need to add, that this would go on the website. So as we meet with possible donors, there's more of a sketch. I mean, there are things that I say to donors, like the $1 million we have not moved off of, but to really talk about somebody comes forward with $250,000, what does that mean? We also talked about, is $1 million from one person? It could be from 4 people. So they might say, we want it to be the ELHS Performing Arts, but we also want these 4 families that are raising the $1 million to be acknowledged. So there's combinations that could be done in order. Yes, Holly?
This is great work. One question I have, I work for a public health organization, and we have rules about what we won't accept.
Right.
I think of what happened, was it at the Colisee with the, so if you come up with kind of rules in terms of that can be really helpful.
Right. We've talked about that, not at this meeting, but we've talked about it at prior meetings, is we're going to have to say, in good standing, those type of, yes, we're going to have to tease out that. We have in policy, if you want to name something and there's certain, number of years that they had to have passed, there are things like that. We're probably not going to be at that level, but definitely we're going to have to put criteria down. And then what happens if you're in good standing and then something happens in 10 years? You do something unlawful or whatever, and we might have to do. So we're going to have some caveat. Once the person agrees, we'll probably have to have them sign something. This is what they agree upon as they donate the funds, yeah. There's a lot of layers to this. We're also saying that on the website is going to have probably anything we're giving naming rights. We're going to have to keep track of it, post somebody's name, on the seats, start labeling them, because I might have $1,000 for classroom and I want this certain classroom. So you want to make sure we got to keep track of where everyone's name's going to be, which seat did you select, those type of things. So this was like a first, just kind of as a talking guide for people who are considering a possible naming right. So take a look at it, send me any feedback that you have that we can continue to work on the document.
Do you know who we're going to approach for?
Oh, we have
some of this?
lists.
Yep.
Had a question about you having naming rights for this Performing Arts Center. How about the athletic stadium seating?
That's 5. Oh, for each seat in the athletic stadium? Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I haven't seen that yet. I don't know if they're seats or they benches. What are they?
They're bleachers.
They're bleachers, so a row, I don't know.
In the stadium, there are bleachers outside stadium? Not seats?
Right.
Okay.
We hadn't seen that on anyone else's at this point, but that doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean it can't be done.
Right, doesn't mean if somebody would like to. We're game.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yep.
Katie.
What? No.
Communications? Or was it a hybrid?
Oh,
with
we're
communication,
all
fundraising?
together. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, because the communication weighs in on how would we get this out, type of thing. Do you want to add anything, Adam?
Well, just that, yeah, once this is ready to go public, I think communications will have a big role in making sure that happens
Yep.
and coordinating it with the city and with whoever else we need to coordinate it so that when we launch it, it really gets some exposure. But we're probably a couple months away from that at least.
The other thing that we didn't talk about at the committee, but Adam and I did meet with Androscoggin Bank to talk about AndroGov, which is their collection. So we do PayPal right now for contributions. We do have close to $56,000 in contributions right now that has come through. So we asked Androscoggin Bank to give us their background on AndroGov, and we're also going to look at other banks that may do that as well to see what is the best interest rate. Right now, we don't charge for the fee. It gets deducted off the donation. And so we're thinking we're going to attach the percentage to the donation, similar to that what you would do for the Dempsey Challenges so that's something we're looking at on the donation website. But we did meet with the Androscoggin Bank this week to talk about AndroGov, because people know that, but there may be other ones to get people the best interest for the donation. So we're doing things behind the scene as well, and I did meet with another donor this week as well.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you to all the subcommittees for all their hard work. It's been a lot of fun meeting with everyone and watching this evolve into the project it is. And so we are kind of at that point in the subcommittees, just looking for acknowledgement from the building committee that they're in support of what the subcommittees have recommended for us to move forward with. And I know there's some specific questions about certain things we can look into. But the idea is that with your approval or acknowledgement that we can proceed with that, then there will be, instead of in December, having a subcommittee meeting, which was, the idea was it was a community information night to kind of let them know where we've arrived at, that would actually be in January, because we all know December is a pretty tough time of year. And so with that, before we move on to the next part of tonight, just looking for an acknowledgement for everyone that we're okay moving forward with the recommendations, and then look to have a community information night in January to inform the public as to what the recommendations are.
I just want to be sure that Scott and Peter talk and we know what the results of their talking is.
Yep.
Before we approve changing turf to another field.
Absolutely. So once we find out that information, we can communicate that to
Okay,
everyone.
good.
All right.
I mean,
Anything else? So I saw a lot of heads nodding up and down. So with that, we're gonna move on. So the programming, a lot of the stuff you guys have seen before. So all the draft design statements, the guiding principles, design patterns. These are all things that we're constantly referring back to every step of the way. We had talked about doing focus groups or deep dives into the different areas. We've met with almost every group in the building at least once. We have another date to go back in early December to hit the other, were we on a maroon day or a white day?
We're on a white day
We're
now.
on a
We
white
need a
day.
maroon day.
We need to hit the maroon day now, just because we know teachers are really busy and that different teachers have free periods on different days. So we want to make sure that we have, everybody has an opportunity to weigh in. And great feedback. We spent pretty much the whole day there. I think it was the 17th. We started in the morning with the students, and then we met with folks all the way until about 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We had sent out a survey to the staff before we met with them, and there's lots and lots of questions in the survey, but the ones that we find are really telling are these words or phrases that we ask from the staff and the faculty, or what are the words that capture the essence of the new ELHS. And I don't think any of these are new to anybody here. This is stuff we've heard all the way through. It's really this idea of creating a community center or a center of the community. It needs to be welcoming, innovative, and spacious. needs to be bright, modern, and current. And then there was sort of in the 9%, a bunch of other things that we heard were, fresh start, flexible, open, state-of-the-art, enriching, engaging the community, beautiful and hopeful. So really all great things to aspire to. And again, it's what we're sort of looking to as we start to really get into the details of the design. So the staff, and I apologize for the small font, storefront meetings, just sort of high-level summaries. We met with special education. They really wanted us to explore maybe moving the location of the self-contained programs to the first floor for better accessibility. We did explore that. We do have that in the plans right now, which we'll show in a little bit. Aspirations, so both we met with Tiny House program and graphics. Tiny House was really excited about the adjacency to the other CTE programs that they were near. So they are near architectural and engineering, as well as mechanical engineering and robotics. And so there's a lot of great, and graphics as well. So there's a lot of great synergy in that hallway. And then the graphics program just talked about how that program may evolve in time to incorporate more multimedia. Social studies talked about how they thought it would be great if the teacher work areas were organized by discipline to promote shared resources, and then that they need flexible furniture and backpack storage. Adult education, so that they would, right now their office is on the second floor, that they would prefer to be on the first floor as they kind of serve as that gatekeeper during evening hours. And so that's something we kind of wanted to open up for discussion here. Right now they are on the second floor. Is if there's a desire to have them on the first floor, or is there other folks in the building during that time, and sort of what the preference was of everybody. So I can stop here and we can talk about that, or we can go through all the teacher comments and circle back to that. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Scott.
Yeah, we can keep going.
Okay, we'll revisit it. So arts, lots of display space throughout the school, so this idea of celebrating the student work, both in a physical sense as well as digital. Ample storage within the art rooms. They're in support of the glazing into the classrooms. Right now, the plan has a lot of glazing from the corridor into the art rooms, really celebrating learning, or as you'll hear us say, put learning on display. The current digital media art lab may be a program that can be integrated into the broadcast media lab, so that idea of sort of some flexibility within spaces. And then math was looking for magnetic display space and plenty of whiteboard space. Science was in support of the clustering of the rooms to promote shared materials. And they need ample storage, demonstration space, and flexible furnishing. And then health and PE were in support of the flexibility that the health and PE classrooms have, as well as the amount of PE athletic storage. And they recommended some modifications to the outdoor athletics area. One in particular was the location of a gate into the field. It was aligned right where it was the, I believe, finish line to the track, and so it started to impede on where they set up their tents, and it kind of created a cluster of people. So we looked at relocating that to prevent that. And then family and consumer sciences, making sure that they have plenty of outlets. And so all great conversations. Not that we're biased, but we really enjoyed our conversation with the students. It was really entertaining. There was a lot of them. There was probably, what,
and
80?
it was what, 7 o'clock in the morning?
7 o'clock
or
in the morning,
something
and
ungodly early hour.
I wish I
for some
had their
of us.
energy at 7 o'clock in the morning.
But they were great. There was probably, what, I don't know, 60 or so students in the gym that we met with, and this is a leadership group that meets regularly. And it was great feedback. I think the time went by like that.
Yeah. And just a lot of conversations going on, and a lot of consensus around things. As you can see the list behind me about their thoughts on a lot of thoughts on the cafeteria, and a lot of thoughts on the courtyard. They're really excited around this idea of a courtyard and how they envision utilizing it. And then other priorities, a lot of talk both between faculty and staff around bathrooms, and simple things like water fountains that can fill, their water bottles, variety of seating. And they're adamant that they have no lockers. They do not want them. They can't fit things in them, nor do they have time to access them during the day. And they didn't want any carpet. So it's just some interesting insights from the kids, and we hope to meet with them again. We'd like to set up another time to get back together with them and work through, get better insight as to how they sort of view the school and what a day in the life of a student is like at EL, and what they envision it being like. A lot of jealous students. They realized quickly that they wouldn't experience this building, and I think they were pretty sad about that.
How many, did you have a mix of grades?
That group is a 9 through 12 group. Yeah, there was.
And none of them will be at the school, at the new school?
No.
The ninth graders won't?
Did you consider talking to the eighth graders that are coming in?
We're happy to talk to any of the students. If
Those
there's
are the kids that
other
will be
sort of
there.
leadership groups or groups that we can get together with, we'd be happy to do that.
Just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a good thought, that we should take and go down to the
The
lower
middle school,
grades.
yeah.
Yep, we
Even
can give a presentation and just open it up for discussion like we did here, and just, they experience the building completely differently than we do. And so to hear their insights are really helpful.
The ninth grade, current ninth grade won't be there, right?
No, it's eighth grade.
So with that, we are making our way through our programming. We are setting up a public safety meeting, hopefully in December, and then we have an additional programming meeting to do a little bit deeper dive on some of the program areas and meet with some staff that we may not have met with yet. But we've had a lot of great conversations with a lot of great people, really getting insight as to how they use their space now and how they envision using it in the future. The site, so just a quick update on some of the design aspects of the building and the site. Frank is very busy working on grading the site and getting all the parts and pieces to work together. And so this is where the current design is. Most people wouldn't be able to tell that many things have moved around, but there's been different moves on the site, especially around athletics, as those conversations have evolved around locations of different track and field events, and just some slight shifting of things here and there. Probably what you will see here in a minute when I go to the floor plan is in the courtyard, there's been a lot of development. So we've really started to dig into the design of the courtyard, and I have a blow up of that here in a minute. But again, not wholesale changes other than the SPED program has moved down to the front of the building, and here's the courtyard. I'll start there first. It is, the text is upside down. We present the building a certain way to you guys. We design it another way in our system, so I apologize for the upside down text, but the idea is to really start to create spaces outside. And so when we think about, we come into the building, right here through the main lobby, you start to have that cafe of the culinary dining, kind of see my mouse here. And this is that idea of the outdoor cafe. So really this idea where there's hardscape area for tables and people to sit right out from the outside of the cafe here.
And that whole wall from the library down to the corner is all glass. And so you can see right, when you first come into the building, you'll see right into that space.
So it's that idea of bright and welcoming and connection to nature. And the other areas that have been created is a library terrace, so an area where you can spill out from the library out to an outdoor space, whether it's for a classroom function or just students and teachers getting together, or you just want to go outside and read. The other area is outdoor eating off of the student commons, so place to eat, and then outdoor classrooms off of the mechanical and robotics and architectural and engineering area. And then a center node that kind of connects all these different pathways together and starts to create different areas for outdoor learning as well. And there's a nice mix of some easy to maintain vegetation as well as some trees that provide some shade in this area as well.
And then there's various seating opportunities around the edges of the paths as well, that's as a center space. So really an active space. It's envisioned as a really an outdoor room that's part of the school, and that you use it that way.
And so this is just showing how we were able to take the self-contained that was on the second floor towards the north end of the building and move it towards the front of the school on the first floor. It allows this program that does a lot of day trips. Sometimes they'll go, I believe they might go swimming during the day.
They go bowling,
They go
I think,
bowling.
every week.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I know. It sounds like a really fun program. So they wanted to be able to have easy access to transportation, but also for any of the kiddos that may be wheelchair bound, it's less of a traverse across the school for them, and they're right near the elevator here.
And it was also, one of the things was a little more difficult too is access to the cafeteria at lunchtime too, and the ability to be on the same level as the cafeteria made some sense.
Are you thinking moving the director of CTE up to where adult ed? How big is that? I mean, what are
Yeah.
you proposing to put adult ed?
Yeah, they're almost interchangeable in some ways, that little area that's correct, that CTE would potentially move right up to that space upstairs, and adult ed would move downstairs. And that was, again, conversation was who is that presence, administrative presence in the building after school is done, and that's kind of where that conversation grew from.
The other thing with that is I know people come in during the day to access the adult ed office,
Right.
to sign
Correct.
up. So if
Yep.
you don't want them walking
Right.
That's a good point.
through the corridors, I mean, now they do,
Right.
but that should be considered.
Yeah, I think you're right. Right now, that second office area next to that second set of doors on the right-hand side of the entrance right now kind of functions as the entrance for the adult ed,
Good.
separate. And so in the idea is how do we replicate some of the way that currently functions in the new layout?
Can you just put your cursor on the adult ed?
It's upstairs, so it's not actually on this plan.
Okay.
It's,
That piece hadn't been finalized. That was
Okay.
just, that was part of the conversation when they came and met with staff, like stuff for us to have to consider and see what's
Explore.
possible and what's plausible.
Yep.
To answer your question, Bonnie, right now, the space allocation is up on the second floor right here by the elevator.
And where do you anticipate moving it to on the first floor?
The request was that it be moved to the first floor, and so we can explore that, and maybe that it's where the director's office, like Katie said, here, and then we can look for a location, whether the director's office for CTE goes upstairs or it's incorporated somewhere else downstairs.
There's always that trade-off, like the reason that was positioned on the second floor, because it gave it great access to guidance, where there's a lot of opportunities for those conversations. So you have to balance that with their need for really being the gatekeepers for the building in off hours and having access for people to come in during the day to do that registration. So there's that trade-off, because it was mindful of why they were positioned on the second floor to begin with.
So you can't share that space there, the director's office with adult ed and CTE? No?
I think they both need a space about that
Okay.
big for their function.
Okay.
Yeah, part of the challenge too is that as we recall, adult ed is not covered by the state, and so
Right.
that was a locally funded, and the area that we assigned to that is constraints in thinking about their layout, so.
Okay.
And so the program that was in that location, where it was where we moved these self-contained programs, were some of the CTE programs, so the exploratory medical, as well as aspiration programs, business accounting, career development, and family and consumer science. And so those go on the second floor. And so now you actually have a complement of CTE aspiration programs on the second floor. It was just one wing before, but now there's multiple programs on the second floor. And we've talked about the theater. And then the kitchen, kind of hard to see up here, but just to emphasize that the design continues to evolve and that this is the kitchen part, the culinary, we're still passing back and forth with the kitchen designer, but really, really great conversations with the kitchen staff at EL. We are amazed at what they do with the space they have. I mean, absolutely amazed. Great group of folks. And then the culinary CTE program that we've had a lot of meetings on over at the Green Ladle and working through what that arm of that program will look like here at this school. And so in the kitchen design right now, it's just showing sort of the servery here, different access point uses, because you have, so this is the area that is more of the culinary program for the cafe.
Okay.
And it's a true teaching kitchen.
Yep.
So there's a classroom in there. It's where the students are doing hands-on learning. There's great visibility so that the other students can see them cooking, and then they are serving the cafe down here.
Okay.
There's culinary aspirations, which is the culinary version the aspirations program within EL right now that teaches culinary, which will be adjacent to that. So there is some cross-pollination there. Different kitchens, and then the kitchen for the actual school and the students that buy lunch at the school is back here, and this is where the service is, and this is where they all sit.
Okay.
And so the second floor, not too many changes. You're starting to see a lot of furnishing and casework being populated. We're just really exploring at this point all the different possible options, and then we'll come forward to Scott and his staff with some recommendations for different areas, and we'll get into furniture selection a little.
Flip on the second.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that was back here.
Yeah, okay.
And not too much change on the third floor. These are the classroom communities that are replicated throughout the building. So with that, the schedule, just a reminder, the DOE schedule, we're still sort of in this 14-15 step of working through design development, developing the design, and our next meeting, we just had a meeting in November, I think it was. We'll have another meeting about mid-December with them, just to kind of check in where we're at. And then we'll probably meet with them on a monthly, if not bi-monthly basis, to keep them up to speed on the progress of documents. And so we're marching right along through DD. We're coming towards the end of our design development milestone, and getting wrapping up all our program meetings, getting all of our detailed information so that come the new year, we are changing from design development into the construction documents and preparing the drawings for bidding next fall. And with that, we have our subcommittee meeting tonight. We have a DOE meeting on the 16th. We have canceled the meeting on the 17th, but we'll have a community information night. I think we threw out a couple dates for the 22nd or the 23rd. I don't know, Kay, if you want to talk about those a little bit.
Right. So we won't know yet because we have a new school committee. So looking at, they have their first meeting December 18th. So talking to them about a possible retreat on a lot of information they have to be updated, one being the new high school. And so one of the proposals is if they agree that their school committee meetings in January will be on the second Wednesday and the fourth Wednesday instead of the first and the third, we would do the proposed community information night 6 to 7 on the 22nd before the school committee meeting at 7 and have it here. So the informational night would be here from 6 to 7, then turn into a school committee meeting 7, or set up in the community room doing information, or set up here for overflow over there. The other option was Auburn Middle School on the 23rd from 6 to 7, and just do it just that. So whatever the group would want. Auburn Middle School is available on the 23rd, or we do it in combination on the 22nd.
Any thoughts on a preferred night or location?
So the 22nd would be a combined school committee meeting and this informational session.
Well, their meetings start at 7, so this would be prior to their meeting, yes.
Yeah. I just think that would be nice so that the school,
It's not really a community forum, because they're not going to weigh in on changing anything. It's more Harriman and the subcommittees, like what you just did tonight. This is what it's going to look like, each group present, and then it's just updating. It's almost like when they do a hearing on a project, this is what we're doing. So,
I think it would make sense to get the new school committee, all the members completely up to date.
right.
I
So
think it
this
makes
would be
sense to do it.
scheduled the same night, so they would come at 6 for their, what normally might be a workshop, they would have an informational meeting. And we would do a postcard that it's from 6 to 7 on that night.
And it would allow people to tune in on YouTube.
Correct, exactly.
Facebook, whatever, also.
Yeah.
To me, that makes sense.
I'm hearing,
I like that.
let's attempt for January 22nd. I'm going to try to put a tentative calendar. Well, I'm going to have a tentative calendar for their December 18th meeting, and then we'll confirm with everybody, yes, they agreed to that. Okay. All right, January 22nd.
Sounds good. And that's all we have. Are there any questions?
one thing in looking at that beautiful courtyard is just to, and I saw trees, to make sure there's a lot of shade.
Yep.
I think for a number of different reasons.
We'll definitely be mindful of that.
Brandy wasn't in our meeting, and she has been consecutively in our meeting, and she has always spoken about grants on it. Is it time to do grants? What are we doing with grants? Because she's ready to write.
She has been in contact with Anna and I when she's looking at grants. Some of it is grants fund things that aren't already being funded, so it's teasing out what is additional in order to write the grant. So I think that's where she's kind of watching things around, you know, the second turf field is definitely something she's kept an eye out on grants. But then it's, you know, how many trees addition, you know, things that you have to have a reason for the grant, and then you have to have an argument why the grant money is needed. So I think that's where it gets a little tricky.
And I know from a performing arts standpoint, we're still, we've talked about this, like, they're going to be putting together over the next month, whatever, so what our package looks like, and we then will need to look at what's being funded, and so that's still, we're kind of in the midst of some of those things, you know.
And the other thing is the broadcast lab. Should that not be on one of your giving levels?
Yeah.
Even naming the courtyard.
The broadcast lab.
Forecast maybe, yeah.
They do
Yeah, she did, okay.
I did add the, yeah.
stuff, media's.
Or maybe like a nursery or, you know, one of the greenhouse places. where-
And the kitchen, we have 45 kitchens there. Can somebody donate? Can we ask somebody for donations or some?
Like dishwashers and.
Right,
all that
exactly,
stuff. And if
exactly.
they put their name, you know, their.
Name on the
business
dishwasher.
That's, I mean, to me, that,
And then the other thing that I want to be sure that we're up to date with is the planning staff. To be sure there's no bumps in the planning staff.
Yeah, they just met recently with the planning development committee, and they're scheduled for the planning board in February.
Good, good. Thank you.
Bonnie, just a question. It's not really about the building as much as it is about what kind of impact you think the CTE programs and what's being provided with this new high school is going to have on students in the school. This is very exciting, what's going on here. And I know it's really not the purview of the school building committee to a certain extent, but I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are on that. Maybe not necessarily now, tonight, but at some point, have a discussion about that. I think that would be really interesting, and I know I would find it interesting and beneficial to hear what your thoughts are, Scott and Katie and others, on what kind of impact you think these programs and offerings are going to have in this community with these young people.
Thank you. We'll see you in January. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're still on air, guys.
To do something with the new council.
You got open mic tonight?
On this. Yeah. Something with the new council.